In the footsteps of George Bush, Barack Obama maintains the controversial policy of rendition. But has it worked at all? And how would Obama reconcile rendition with his human rights rhetoric? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Sahil Rahman. US President Barack Obama is being accused of recycling one of his predecessor's most controversial policies, the transfer of prisoners for interrogation, otherwise known as rendition. In January, the president announced the creation of a special task force on interrogations and transfer policies, and this week that task force has given its recommendations. They include improving their ability to interrogate what they call the most dangerous terrorists by creating a specialised group. This will be made up of experienced interrogators from the intelligence community. The other recommendations cover the transfer of prisoners from country to country for interrogation, and this is commonly known as rendition. It was criticised during the Bush administration because many prisoners apprehended and transferred under the protocols were transited through countries that allow torture. Many of these prisoners have claimed they were tortured during this process. Now, the Special Task Force is recommending that rendition-type transfers continue, but they've set out their ideas to prevent the torture of prisoners. And these include obtaining assurances from foreign countries that they'll have monitoring mechanisms in place. The task force has suggested that the State Department be involved in evaluating all of these assurances. And the recommendations also say countries should ensure there'll be consistent private access to the transferred prisoner. And to help facilitate all of this, they say the US will give advance notice to the government of that country that they'll be detaining the prisoner before he or she arrives. But the American Civil Liberties Union says these assurances were also required under the Bush administration but were never enforced. Amrit Singh says it's extremely disappointing that the Obama administration is continuing the Bush administration's practice of relying on diplomatic assurances, which have been proven completely ineffective in preventing torture. Well, joining me on this edition of Inside Story in Washington, D.C., Corey Crider. She's an attorney at the human rights group Reprieve. Also in Washington, D.C., Rolma Gutrecht. He's a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And in Birmingham, England, Mozambique. He's a former Guantanamo Bay detainee and spokesman for the human rights organisation Cage Prisoners. To all of my guests, welcome to Inside Story. Corey Crider, can I begin with you? Rendition will continue under a different guideline, perhaps, and conditions. Has Obama contradicted himself? Wasn't all of this supposed to stop under his new administration?
It is fairly disappointing. President Obama had said, as candidate Obama, in an article in 2007 in Foreign Affairs, that he was going to get rid of the process of extraordinary rendition. I think that means abolishing it, not trying to whitewash it and creating basically rendition 2.0. And Amrit Singh was right that in the past 8 years, rendition has been used entirely to send suspects to places where they're abused, and that diplomatic assurances are a fig leaf, and a very flimsy fig leaf at that, for abuse of prisoners. And so it is extraordinarily disappointing that the Obama administration is going to continue the practice. And I think it basically amounts to the creation of a separate legal system for Muslims.
Mr. Correct, I bring you in here also from Washington, D.C. Is that your opinion? Do you agree with what Ms. Crider has just said?
Well, I mean, I think it was pretty much inevitable that the Obama administration was going to do this. I mean, when rendition really started to develop under the Clinton administration, they did it really for two reasons. One, they didn't want to detain people. They didn't want to try them. Obviously, the Obama administration doesn't want to have its own Guantanamo Bay, so you have to get rid of these people somehow, particularly if you gather in new ones, as we may well be doing in Afghanistan. So rendition gives them the easy way out to take these folks and transfer them to someone else who's willing to take them. And I suspect, you know, you run through the Egyptians, Jordanians, the Saudis, and others, you'll find someone more than eager to take these folks and build a stronger clandestine private relationship.
Are you disappointed, though? Are you disappointed by what's being said?
Well, I'm not in favor of rendition. I think that the United States should handle these individuals itself. and that includes issues of interrogation, aggressive interrogation. You shouldn't ask other people to do your dirty laundry. I don't know. We'll have to see. I mean, if the Obama administration believes its own statements about aggressive interrogation, then they will not be sending these people abroad to be interrogated since they don't believe it's worthwhile. If, on the other hand, they believe the CIA and its statements that aggressive interrogation can work, then I suspect the Obama administration, if they're confronted with a serious situation of a detainee who may have terrorist information, they may blink and be hypocritical and transfer these people to whatever country to be aggressively interrogated by others, and they will do things that obviously we will not.
Well, let's bring in our third guest here from Birmingham, England, and a man who certainly knows what it's like to be at the sharp end of interrogation, certainly when being captured. Moisson Boeg, obviously formerly from Guantanamo Bay. I mean, what was your reaction when you heard this news that President Obama will continue this policy, be it under a different guise?
Well, it's extremely sad. Before, Obama said that he said he wants to turn a new leaf. But you can't turn a new leaf until you read what's on the leaf. You've not read what's on the page to begin with. And this whole idea that people who carried out torture, which is a crime in itself, can be let off scot-free simply because they want to move forward. The problem also exists, as far as I'm concerned, is that in the formulation of this new interrogation group for high-value detainees, who are going to be these experienced interrogators? They're going to be the ones who were already involved in, I believe, the interrogation of high-value detainees, and that's all ranges all the way from people like Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi, who's now dead in Libya, whether it's people like Khalid Sheikh or Abu Zubaydah, who were tortured with waterboarding and other techniques. I mean, what are they going to bring to the table of experience in terms of what they've already done and have got away with? And that is extremely crucial when people are talking about let's start a new leaf, which I completely agree with, but you can't do that until there's been some redress in terms of what's been done in the past, because there are people who are suffering directly as a result of that. And in the worst case scenario, we look at, as I said, in the case of Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi, we went to war. We went to war based upon the tortured and forced confession of this man, and there has been no redress and no investigation into it.
Ms. Kreider, can I just bring you in here as well from Washington? That is a bit of a problem at the moment. It's just an announcement at the moment. The fine detail of who would be on these panels, who would be the investigators, is still yet to be discussed or even made public.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I certainly don't object to the creation of a team of experts, provided that those experts do understand what the problems were with the coercive interrogation techniques of the past. Let's talk about exactly what this looks like. We discussed rendition in the abstract, but what it really means is that someone is taken and bundled into a van, for example, hooded, handcuffed, and shuttled to a dark detention site away from any kind of legal process. It happened as recently as 2007 to one of our clients in Guantanamo Bay, a Kenyan who was picked up on the streets of Mombasa, shuttled to various abusive sites by Kenya's notorious anti-terrorism police unit, and then when he wouldn't adopt his coerced confession before a Kenyan magistrate, and therefore it was tainted and it couldn't be admitted in a Kenyan court, he was just handed to the U.S. military, and the U.S. military took him to Djibouti, then to Bagram, then to Kabul, then to Guantanamo Bay. I don't think that's any way to conduct intelligence operations or any way to prepare someone for any kind of a criminal trial.
And that's certainly what Mr. Obama is going to try and head off, certainly for less criticism. Mr. Gutrek, can I bring you in? You wrote in the New York Times in December 2008 that Obama, if elected, would have to make the same awful choices Presidents Bush and Clinton had to make. Your prediction seems to have come true.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I think it was more or less inevitable that the Obama administration was going to adopt rendition. I mean, we'll have to see how aggressively they use it, but it is crystal clear that the Obama administration doesn't want anything to do with the Guantanamo Bay. They may not be able to shut down the facility as it is, and the last thing on the planet that they want is to have more people coming into the system. There's only one way to guarantee that doesn't happen, and that is to render these individuals elsewhere and allow foreigners to detain them and do whatever they want to do with them.
But it certainly seems that the process is going to continue in one form or another. Are you a little bit sceptical, though, of American assurances that these prisoners will not be tortured in the countries that they're sent to? Are you sceptical at the way that this could be monitored in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, State Department officers are hardly in a position to do this rather well. That's not what Foreign Service officers do. The chief of stations, the CIA chiefs of stations, will probably not want to go into details about these things. That they will mention it on a regular basis will probably be true. Further investigation, it just really would upset a liaison relationship. There'll be much more important things that a CIA station chief will want to discuss than whether this individual or that individual is being treated roughly.
Ms. Kreider, it does seem quite strange that the Americans don't adopt the same sort of interrogation techniques that perhaps are available in other countries, and therefore by not interrogating on US soil, they are not just deferring but absolving themselves of any responsibility of how they get that information to prosecute individuals with or stop terror crimes.
That's exactly right. It's effectively outsourcing abuse of prisoners. We've seen this come up in the United Kingdom, where Reprieve is based, where British interrogators, similarly in Pakistan, simply outsourced interrogation of terror suspects, sort of stood outside the room and sort of played dumb about what had happened, buried their head in the sand like an ostrich. And that's no way for a democracy to behave. And in terms of whether the diplomatic assurances are going to work, I think that the other gentleman is exactly right, that it's not easy for the State Department or a CIA station chief to follow up. I don't think they would be particularly inclined to follow up. And when someone is handed over with diplomatic assurances, with this kind of a wink and a nod, it would be fairly easy for the regime to sort of clean up its interrogation for a few days while the prisoner sort of recovers, and then bring in the foreign, the United States or the UK interrogator, and then, of course, to stand in the room. So the person doesn't bear any physical signs of their torture, and when the United Kingdom person or the United States agent asks, "Are you being treated okay?" the prisoner looks over at the person who's conducted the abuse of them, looks back at the United States interrogator and says, "Yes, everything is just fine." I mean, you can spin out all kinds of scenarios that the rendition program is very likely to entail, and that's just one of them.
Muazzam, we've had various reactions to Guantanamo Bay, certainly where you are in the United Kingdom. On hearing this news, how do you think the British public would react in general to what the Americans are suggesting they're going to do now?
Well, I think, at least in Britain, there's been some response and some rejection of the American idea of interrogating people in this way. I think what we need to recognize is that although that interrogation process that's been initiated by the United States of America, which allowed people to be extraordinarily rendered and tortured and so forth, has in one way, as Corey said, been adopted by other countries. And in Britain, we'd have several cases of individuals who have been tortured either at the behest of British intelligence services or present there. So we have, for example, with the case of Binyam Mohammed, with the case of Fareed Hilali and many other people. In fact, we compiled a report just 2 months ago which identified over 29 different individuals who were tortured in countries around the world at the behest or with the presence of British intelligence. And we know that there's an intelligence gathering cooperation between the United States of America and Great Britain, which allows for this sort of thing to happen. And I think the other thing that people need to recognize is that when we're talking about rendition in itself, there may be an argument, as it had happened before in the past, before the war on terror, to render somebody, but to render somebody to justice. What we've seen thus far is that people are rendered, and rendition is simply the beginning of a process of kidnap, abduction, false imprisonment, and torture. And that's what happens. People have been rendered and then taken into secret detention sites and tortured. And then when that information has been extracted, it's been used by all countries as a justification to continue this technique. And of course, organizations like Reprieve, like my own Cage Prisons, have tried to expose what's taking place. And it's only through this embarrassment that people like Obama and others have now backtracked and said that we want to turn a new page.
It's been a fast-paced week Corey, just for a moment, Corey. Sorry, it's been a fast-paced week in the US. I just want to bring our viewers up to speed with some other details which will help with the rest of this discussion. Because also this week, the CIA was pressured to hand over a detailed official description of its interrogation program to the American Civil Liberties Union. The 2004 report describes the use of abusive interrogation techniques, including forced nudity, sleep deprivation and dietary military manipulation, revealing a host of incidents in which interrogators went far beyond legal bounds. As a result of the report, the US Attorney General Eric Holder has ordered an investigation into interrogation abuses. Also, President Obama has decided that the interrogation of terrorism suspects will be taken out of the hands of the CIA. It will now be handled by a newly created group housed at the FBI and directly accountable to the White House. Corey, let me bring you in. You just wanted to react to what Muazzam had to say.
Yeah, that's right. The other thing that obviously rendition involves, in addition to torture and interrogations, is disappearing someone. This comes up, as the other commentator said, in the context of transfers from Guantanamo Bay. We've got over 200 people there that the Obama administration has pledged to release from Guantanamo, but hasn't effectively moved somewhere else. And there's a real risk that some of those prisoners are going to be sent, particularly now that we've said that rendition is okay, to places like Algeria or Tunisia, where they're very likely to be tortured. And obviously we have concerns, significant concerns, about using this process to sweep individuals under the rug. And it's not just Guantanamo. It's not as if that's not likely to continue. There was another individual called Mustafa Mariam Nasser who was picked up in Pakistan in 2005, rendered through various sites, including Diego Garcia, and has effectively disappeared in Syria. So that's another set of problems, that basically the rendition policy that we're seeing is perhaps going to be a fig leaf for what's otherwise known as enforced disappearance. And
Mr. Grecht, also in DC, I mean, as we hear of these stories that continue to be brought to the public or into the public domain about people disappearing through rendition, and as I just mentioned before, we ask about public opinion in the United Kingdom. I mean, how do you think this news is going to go down with the American public where you are?
Oh, I don't think it's going to be much of an issue. I think, the Obama administration has probably made a serious mistake with its decision to release the Internal Inspector General report at the agency. This is inevitably going to cause a debate inside the United States about methods and means. I suspect that as that debate gains steam, you will find that a majority of Americans may be quite willing to tolerate and approve of aggressive forms of interrogation against mass casualty terrorists if it is shown that these actions were in fact effective. And that's really going to be the big issue. And I think you'll have growing pressure upon the administration to release the internal memoranda, and there are lots of them, on accounting for the results of these interrogations. Did they really stop terrorist acts? Did they provide worthwhile information? So I think we're going to have a pretty vivid discussion of this in the United States in the next 18 months. And I'm not sure it's going to redound to the administration's credit, and it may be disturbing to many to discover that the American people possibly won't be all that upset by it.
But of course, one of President Obama's, or President-elect then Obama's, promises was to close down Guantanamo. It was one of his first executive decisions. Corey Crider, are we getting mixed messages from the Obama camp and the White House? Because you have him now appointing Eric Holder appointing John Durham as the career prosecutor looking into the abuse of detainees. That doesn't guarantee prosecution, but it does keep the controversy alive. And therefore, you have the Republicans saying, look, you're still following our policies, and you have the liberal side of the Democratic Party worried about Obama following Republican policies.
Well, Eric Holder's decision was one that was taken independently in his role as the Attorney General. I'm not sure that the Obama administration was thrilled about Eric Holder's decision to pursue accountability. In terms of whether the Obama administration is sort of skirting the sides between the right and the left, I do think that we are going to have an excuse me, that we are going to have an open and honest discussion about interrogation techniques in the United States. And it may be that there is shockingly little outrage in the United States about the way these people have been treated, because not only is this the culture of kind of 24 cowboy law enforcement, where we think that the way to get the person to talk is by beating them, or putting the electrodes on. The other thing, I think, is that people just assume that these are bad guys, and they're not going to get it wrong, and that this is never going to happen to someone like us. We haven't heard of anyone go through the rendition system who wasn't a Muslim, and I think that whatever it is that the American public may think about it, if the Obama administration is serious about trying to rehabilitate its image in the eyes of the Middle East, who view this whole package of policies as targeting them, then I think the administration is going to want to think twice. In terms of having the honest discussion about the interrogation techniques, I think it's also, one of the things I hope is that experienced interrogators who believe that rapport building and other non-coercive techniques are actually more effective will weigh in and that their voices will be heard. Mr.
Grecht, how divisive then is this issue about sort of honest conversations about detainee abuse? I mean, if John Durham does find that the CIA or CIA officials were guilty of abuse and prosecutions could be pending, is that a big problem then for the Obama administration?
It could be a firestorm. I mean, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, if the investigation reveals that there were individuals guilty of far, far worse things than, say, waterboarding, then I suspect it won't be a firestorm. That if you show abuse that all sides can agree on went beyond the bounds and has not already been cleared by the Justice Department, and that the Justice Department found no grounds for prosecution, then, you know, it probably won't be much. But if in fact this leads to some type of a broad attack on the standard agency methods since 2002 to handle senior members of Al-Qaeda, then I suspect this could turn into a huge firestorm, and it will not just divide along Democratic and Republican lines, but it will divide individuals who really have fundamentally different interpretations of national security and what is necessary to maintain national security against a threat such as Al-Qaeda.
Ms. Kreider, can I just have your thoughts on that final comment as well as we end the program?
I absolutely think that there's going to be a discussion and that it could turn into a massive political mess. You know, we see Dick Cheney trying to run a sort of second campaign for the policies that he enacted during his own administration in defense of torture. You know, I think the position of reprieve is not that torture shouldn't be carried out on anyone simply because it doesn't work, but also because torture is wrong and because it makes us like the very groups of people that we're supposed to be combating. So, you know, what I hope is that we'll come out of this discussion moving away from these policies, but it's absolutely true that it's too soon to tell.
Well, it certainly seems high on the agenda, and therefore, the moment we have to leave it. To my guests, Corey Kreider in Washington, Wazam Beg in Birmingham, England, and Roel Mark Recht, also in Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining me on this edition of Inside Story. And thank you for joining me again on this edition of the programme. We do welcome your comments and suggestions, so please do email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Sahil Rahman. Thanks for your time and your company.